How do you learn to compose like Bach? Bach himself knew the answer. He spent much of his life studying other composers. He copied their music by hand, travelled long distances to hear them perform, and analysed manuscripts whenever he could find them. Some of the greatest music ever written began with Bach trying to understand how other musicians thought. Which raises an interesting question. If Bach learned from everyone else, what actually made him Bach? Today, Johann Sebastian Bach stands at the centre of the Baroque canon. Yet he didn't emerge in isolation. His music grew out of a remarkable network of influences stretching across Germany, Italy and France. What's made Bach extraordinary isn't that he invented everything from nothing. It's that he absorbed an astonishing range of musical styles and transformed them into something unmistakably his own. The story begins close to home. By the age of 10, Bach had lost both of his parents. He moved to Ohrdruf to live with his older brother, Johann Christoph Bach. There he received his first serious musical education. Later accounts tell the famous story of Bach secretly copying manuscripts by moonlight, after his brother had forbidden him to access them. Whether every detail is true is less important than what the story reveals. Long before he became a master, Bach was a student. He was fascinated by how music worked and determined to learn from the best examples he could find. That habit would remain with him for the rest of his life. Where did Bach learn to think on a grand scale? The answer lies in an Old-German organ tradition. At the age of 20, Bach famously walked more than 250 miles to Lübeck to hear Dieterich Buxtehude play. Imagine making that journey on foot simply to hear a musician perform. That journey tells us something important about Bach. He was never content with what he already knew. He was always searching for more. The influence of Buxtehude, Reincken and Böhm can be heard throughout Bach's organ music. The great pedal solos, the expansive structures, the sense that musical ideas are constantly growing and transforming before our ears. Listen to the Passacaglia in C minor. Its scale and architectural confidence owe a great deal to this tradition. Yet something else is happening as well. The more influences Bach absorbs, the more individual his own voice becomes. Where did Bach learn clarity and momentum? Italy. Bach never visited Italy, but Italian music came to him. In particular, he became fascinated by Antonio Vivaldi. He copied and arranged Vivaldi's concertos, not because he lacked ideas of his own, but because he wanted to understand how they worked. Italian composers taught him how to organize musical ideas over long spans, how to create contrast, and how to give music a powerful sense of direction. By this point, Bach has absorbed ideas from Germany and Italy. But something curious is happening. The more influences he acquires, the less he sounds like anyone else. When we hear the Brandenburg concertos, the trio sonatas, or many of Bach's later instrumental works, we hear these Italian lessons transformed into something entirely personal. The music always seems to know exactly where it is going. Where did Bach learn elegance? France. French music offers something quite different from the drama of North Germany or the energy of Italy. It's prized refinement, character and expressive detail. Bach admired French composers deeply. He studied François Couperin and copied the entire organ book of Nicolas de Grigny by hand. That's a remarkable fact. People don't spend that amount of time copying music unless they believe there's something important to learn from it. French influence appears throughout Bach's music, in dance movements, ornamentation, expressive nuance, and musical character. Bach's music is often praised for its intellectual power. The French tradition helped ensure that grace and elegance remain part of that achievement. So was Bach original? That depends on what we mean by originality. If originality means creating music without influence, then Bach wasn't original at all. He spent his entire life learning from other composers. But if originality means taking existing ideas and transforming them into something nobody else could have imagined, then Bach may have been one of the most original composers who ever lived. The North Germans gave him scale and imagination. The Italians gave him clarity and direction. The French gave him elegance and refinement. Yet none of these influences explains Bach completely. When we hear the Art of Fugue, the Well-Tempered Clavier, the B minor Mass, or the great organ works, we hear something more than a collection of borrowed techniques. We hear a composer who absorbed an entire musical world and transformed it. Bach didn't become Bach by ignoring other composers. He became Bach by understanding them more deeply than anyone else. That may be his greatest achievement. Not that he stood apart from tradition, but he understood it so completely that he turned it into something uniquely his own.